this presentation is the concentrated result of years of experience and thinking on Matthias's part and my part, and then smashing them together. The usual version takes about an hour to do. So if it's interesting and you have questions, we have a lot more to say. Please invite us to your event, or we'll give a full seminar, or just get in touch for a beer, whatever it is. We'd be really happy to do that with you. So jumping right in, I'm also going to try and talk quite fast because that's how I respond to nervous pressure situations. I hope I'm clear enough. So this is me. I live and work in Cologne, Germany, and have for a very long time. I've been in technology since 2005, and I got my start in the Drupal open source CMS community. I had the privilege to be the 18th employee at Acquia, and was part of building that from 18 to about 900 people before I left. And I now run a little, well, 15 people now, but a consulting shop called Open Strategy Partners, and we do communications and marketing content for technology organizations. And one of our specialties is that we very deeply understand open source, and so we get to work with a lot of wonderful people and companies and organizations and projects in that space. Matthias, you're up.
I'm one of the wonderful people who get to work with Open Strategy Partners. I'm Matthias Lesniak, and I live outside of Oslo in Norway. Most importantly, I'm in the Type 3 Association Board and work with Type 3 now for 21 years. I'm also involved in a SaaS company called Tuju, and I help out at OSP as well. Ping to Jam, who will change the slide to the next one. Here, Type 3, what is that? When I'm at Drupal conferences, I usually run this slide, and they would run pretty much the same slide. PHP-based, free and open source, community-driven, backed by an association, and an enormously long history. We're 26 years this year, so that's quite a history. Ping.
Great. So apparently ping is the Jedi hand signal to you. This is not the slide you're looking for. So very quick, this is what we're talking about today. Open source is freedom, and there's some consequences that come with and responsibilities that come with having it. My take on choosing open source software when and where appropriate is that it is not at all a moral or ethical choice. There are very, very pragmatic good reasons to do so. Then Matthias is going to take over and talk about absolutely wonderful moral and ethical choices and reasons to choose open source software, and why and how and what good it can do in the world. This talk came together because almost exactly a year ago, this article came out, and someone, maybe even Matthias, sent it to me, and it turns out that the Australian government had spent at that point 36 or so million Australian dollars to work with Adobe, which is a proprietary software company, to create a personalization system and an entirely new DXP. And I know that Ken is a super fan of DXPs. And it turns out that after all of that had happened, well, did you know that Australia has a GovCMS that is built on open source, in fact, built on Drupal, built on open source software. It runs 133 government departments in Canberra. It runs a number of state governments. It's got literally thousands of websites, full support program, and very flexible, gives work to Australians. And yet somebody in the government decided to spend money on this proprietary alternative, which the personalization options that they were spending money for were illegal under Australian law at that time because of data privacy. Matthias and I said to ourselves, hey, somebody got the right meeting, but we need to remind people of what the value proposition is. Like, we're out here doing great, at least since 2008 and the recession, and this idea of software at a license price of zero has all made a lot of sense. We've been so busy working and succeeding that we forgot to tell people what is special and important about us. Let's do a talk about that. Here we are. Matthias.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of backtracking here, basically telling everyone what open source is. Next slide. Open source, as Jan mentioned, is freedom. What kind of freedom is open source? Well, it's, next slide, of course, beer, but also a person leaning back there and drinking a lot of beer, because I think that's maybe what we've been doing wrong for quite a long time. But open source is really also free speech, freedom to express yourself. Open source is also choice, the ability to choose exactly how you want to use something, exactly how you want to change something. You've got the whole tool chest there if you want it. But I've got another slide with a gingerbread boy on it. And do you remember the fairy tale about the gingerbread boy? You know, these parents who want a boy so much that they actually try to bake one. That doesn't work in reality, but it does in fairy tales. And when they open up the oven, this boy jumps out and he runs out the door and he experiences lots of stuff. And that is actually a good example of how open source very often works. Somebody sits and really wants something, they build it, and then when they made it, they open source it, it springs out the door, and lots of people can suddenly use it. But that is not only everybody, it also requires something from us. We have to take care of that little puppy project and make sure that everyone focuses on making that project into the best possible thing. So in addition to having the choice and the freedom, we also need responsibility. So open source is not only freedom, it's also actually responsibility. Over to Jan.
Right. So you get wonderful software at a license fee of 0, and you are absolutely within your rights to take it and use it for anything you want to. But if you don't take care of it, if you don't contribute back, if you don't participate in the communities, and no one else does, it's not going to be there at some point. Now, I have spent a long time in this space and a long time in evangelism and pitching open source projects to businesses. So real quick, second definition of open source beyond freedom, we talk about the 4 freedoms a lot. And they're very interesting, and they have really interesting pragmatic consequences. Anyone can use open source software for anything, always and forever. And you are free to look at all the code and understand what it does and how it does it, and if it's secure enough, good enough for your purposes or not. And if it does most of what you want, for example, you're absolutely free to change it and make it whatever you want. Unlike an open source, unlike a closed system, you can then change it. And the magic, the real magic, comes in the 4th freedom, because anything, I can make a perfect distribution package, a perfect piece of software to administer a government department, a school, an advertising campaign, and I can package that and I can sell it to someone else. I can give it to someone else. I can share it to someone else. Any bugs I eliminate, any new features I create, what happens is people tend to put these back into the main package, and it gets better and better and better and better over time. And in the case of Drupal and Typo3 and many other projects, Joomla, WordPress, Linux, and so on, wonderful communities of collaboration and professional people come together and maintain these things, and they grow immensely powerful and extremely secure and very, very high quality over time. And those communities then generate even more value with and for each other. Now, when I'm selling this kind of stuff, you know, I'm going to tell you or a potential customer, I'm not going to say, hey, this is free stuff. Free sets a poor expectation. Every IT project has a budget and costs associated with it. What I am going to tell you is you've got a license fee of 0 that comes with these license conditions of being able to modify and pass your stuff on, right? Now, if you look at a classic proprietary, very simplified budget here, and you compare it to a IT budget based on a free and open source product, once you take out the license fee, right, you still have support, you still have infrastructure costs, You can start to do things like make it prettier, make it more useful, add more features to it, right? Or make it a higher quality, so you can make a better project for the same budget. And we talk about here you can see with an open source project, there's a whole set of costs that are always the same and that they're always there. But once you change in the second row here, if you change the license fee to $0, you choose, you can hire more people, you can train more developers, and you're only paying money for new features and customizations that you need while working on the base of millions of hours of coding that the communities have already built for you. It also happens that there are very powerful secondary effects. You can generally, with major packages, find a local service provider and pay them to make it the product that you need, and you are keeping your money in your local economy. This is very important for governments often. You are generally in a position to own your own data and keep it private. You decide what you need when. You don't have to ask Microsoft or someone else to meet your weird edge case. You can build it for your business, even if you're literally the only business in the world that needs it. That's awesome. And you can make that change happen whenever it is you need it to happen. Now, another pragmatic consequence of the first freedom is if you build your life's work, your vision, your citizen services, or your own business on software that someone else is in control of, they can also take that away from you. You might get an Oracle product and it might be super helpful, and it might be, however, not making enough money for Oracle, and they'll sunset it and they'll tell you you have until January to get your data out of it. You can upgrade to this other thing, which is twice as expensive if you want to, right? And in the restaurant business, they say you've got to own the bricks. Buy the space you put your restaurant into, because if you succeed, your landlord is going to come back and charge you more for your success. I want my government, for example, to be in control of the infrastructure upon which they build the citizen services that I benefit from.
And open source then can actually change the world if you work with it in the right way and understand the foundation it's built on. Let's go to the desert, for example. This is my perfect example of closed source proprietary software in the worst possible way. The desert is a monoculture. It's only sand. The only person who can really rule in the desert is the person who owns the watering hole. You might have a good relationship to that person, but if you have a bad relationship, well, tough shit for you. Open source, on the other hand, is quite different. Open source is like a jungle. Yes, a jungle, there are lots of things going on there, but nothing of this would be here if there wasn't collaboration, if there wasn't a community of plants collaborating. And what the jungle represents for me is this interdependence. You don't have a dependence on a single thing, but everyone's dependent on each other, and you can't survive without collaboration. Jam.
So I have a wonderful example of the pragmatic real value of choosing open source solutions. Up until 2010 in the UK, this was the map of government ICT, IT suppliers. And this maps absolutely directly onto London, Reading, Brighton, and something else in there. So this is absolutely directly the headquarters of IBM, Microsoft, Hewlett Packard, and the usual suspects. At the point around 2010, when the UK government announced they were going to do a digital transformation program, which has worked out very, very well for them, one of the things that they did is that they said for IT projects with a budget of £100,000 or less, was I think the initial threshold, we are going to simplify the tendering process. We're going to make it easier for smaller companies to bid for them. They created a thing called I think it's the G Cloud that's become a bidding mechanism for these stuff. They made a bunch of other changes, and they also said And we have an express preference for open source solutions that meet or exceed the feature offerings of other solutions. So a preference for open source and an open door to invite small to medium businesses to supply IT services to the UK government. They ran some trials on this, and a few years after government transformation, this is the how the IT supplier map in the UK looks, and it's astonishing. And as a government, I would be incredibly proud of this. And you know, you can see that that money that generally went to a lot of foreign companies, Microsoft, IBM, and so on, now stays in the UK economy. And this is a super powerful example. And the funny part about this slide is that there's also 5 dots in the Republic of Ireland, which is part of Europe. But you know, I can't explain that. I always have a little bit of a giggle at that.
And there is a very, very good example of that. And it actually starts with a phone call at the Typo 3 headquarters. That's how our telephones look. We got a phone call from the government of Rwanda, and they said they had 250 websites running Typo 3, and could we help them upgrade? Well, the Typo 3 Association is not a for-profit, and we couldn't do that job for them. We thought through this a bit, and we thought, well, we could have, called up one of our member agencies and said, well, you just take this big government job and earn your money on it. But that's actually how it very often works with closed source software, where you create a business, you just export, take out the money, you leave nothing behind, and it's a colonialist and exploitative way of working. So we couldn't do it that way. Instead, we decided that we could use our community, bring people in from different agencies to create knowledge in Rwanda, to create independent local businesses that could serve their government. And we did that. It looked like this. And a little bit later, it looked like this. They now have close to 300 websites and going towards 500, built, designed, maintained in Rwanda by Rwandans, and creating business sustainable there. And this slide is really the newspaper headline. Well, they don't have space for that long headlines anymore, but really, this is a democratic open source project that is non-profit, that supports a sustainable and independent local business creation. The businesses are locally led, the projects are locally led. The way that we work with it is non-exploitative, and it's anti-colonial because it doesn't depend on anything outside of Rwanda. They can do this by themselves. The only thing that we supply is the expertise. And finally, it also introduces the community aspect, because that's how we solve problems in open source. Through working democratically, working peacefully together. Well, actually, this is the way that we do a lot of stuff in civil society. Civil society is really important for every country in the world. And to tell you that, civil society actually won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2022. That's how important civil society is. So open source can build civil society organizations and bring in all of the positive stuff that comes with that. Jam.
So we gave you the history of why we got scared and motivated to start talking about that in public again. The unique and weird value proposition that open source brings with it, and this economy of plenty idea that we give away our best ideas and they come back even more valuable. How this has really fantastic pragmatic effects in business, and how open source can change things as important as international aid And we exemplify cross-border international collaboration, and co-development and a lot more. And that's incredibly powerful. And I'm very proud to be a part of this. So what happens now is that we'd like to underscore the importance of all of this and invite you to be part of it.
Mhm. And you remember the gingerbread boy? In the fairy tale, he gets eaten by a fox in the end. And that's because he doesn't have any friends who really help him around. And being open source together, the togetherness of open source are also the values of a healthy society. So by doing open source, we actually do democracy building. And looking at the world today, democratic values are under attack. There's a lot of stuff happening where people want to go, well, politically proprietary. But open source strengthens civil society everywhere through participation and community.
And
so, yeah.
All of that being true, there are Matthias and I and tens or hundreds of thousands of our friends and colleagues out there doing this every day and being part of it and making the world a tiny bit better every day and making their own businesses better and making their own lives better, paying their rent in Rwanda and a lot of other places. You can be part of this. You could do better in your business, and you can make the world a tiny bit better every day too. Please look for open source technologies that can do the job for you. Look for local meetups and developers and events, and come hang out with us. There is a very large group of very weird, smart, and interesting people that you can meet, and you'll be very, very welcome to join our communities, and also find help and figure out how to adopt and use this stuff and benefit from it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, both
that
of you.
was exactly 20 minutes, Yannis. Boom.
Yeah, more or less. It was great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was close enough to 20 minutes. Certainly, really appreciate you condensing what I think originally was a 3-day lecture. So well done. And in the time we have, let me jump up to my Norwegian friend, William. Do you want to share a comment or question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeffrey, for the presentation. I'm William. I'm founder of Hackmamba. I'm based in Oslo, Norway. So for the last 5-6 years, I've built open source software, contributed to open source, maintained a really large open source project. But there's a problem I've noticed, right? And currently I'm building the product where I'm in between, should this be open source or closed source? Compared to the number of projects out there, open source projects, those that eventually become prominent, they are just a handful. Getting from 0 to 100 for an open source project, it's difficult. You're a maintainer of an open source project, you need to pay rent, you need to pay bills, you need to do stuff. You can't rely on just the community. And you are at the mercy of the community, but you need money, you need funds to sustain it. So you're at that crossroad where you're thinking, should I continue to do this in hope that it gets really big, we get like donations, grants to keep it going, or I just to close source and try to make a business out of this and pay my bills. That is the crossroad I'm currently at, because I'm building something and I'm thinking, if I make this open source, I have a friend who's built a really fantastic product, open source. It's got hundreds of thousands of users, but they're all free, right? And he has a team of maintainers that look to him to keep the project alive, right? So there's this sort of like a situation where you need resources, but you need to maintain like the open source state. What does someone do in that case?
I will just jump in. It's a very good question, and it's a valid one. And we see in many open source projects maintainer burnout, contributor burnout, people getting so excited that they just spend all of their time doing everything and overcommitting themselves. And that's real, and you need to take care of yourself first. If your project and product delivers value to people, there are going to be, and I mean, delivers value, business value, improves something tangible. The best way to go is to do both of the things that you said. You need that community of enthusiastic people to help you build it and make it better and adopt it and pass it on. And you should offer your consulting and your services and your expertise to other people. So we talk a lot, I think in the old days in the Drupal community, we talked a lot about there are people who are time rich and cash poor. And if they're technical experts and enthusiastic, you want them at your side and having beers with you and contributing code with you. And there are people who don't have time or the expertise, but they need the value that your package delivers, and you should offer them services and build up one or more business models around that. And for me, that's the ideal way to go.
And that is also one of the reasons why we're going around doing this talk, because we think that these kind of questions about, what is sustainable and what does open source really bring of values is a really important topic to talk with people about, because we haven't been talking enough about it.
Yeah, thanks. Would you recommend this approach from the get-go? So from committing the first line of code, you have a mindset of it's both value-driven, but as well, you would need some resources from it. You would need to put some financial component to it when building.
If you're cash poor and you need to pay the rent, right? Please build something that delivers value to others, right? That'll make it way easier.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
All right, I would say thank you once again, both of you, Matthias from Oslo and Jam joining us from Cologne. What a great start to a new year of learning, reminding us about the value of free and open source. Much appreciated, much appreciate the different elements of the details, but also the freedom. We got also here at the end, the good point of avoiding maintainer burnout, take care of yourself. But thank you to everybody who joined. I really appreciate it. I'll make sure to share this. That's all we had, folks, for now.